Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Timeless. So this episode had a very interesting beginning, where we had Lucy having dinner with Agent Christopher and her family. We didn't really get to see her kids, but we saw her kind of sit down with her wife, Michelle, which is very interesting. Like, I think I've seen that actress and stuff from time to time, maybe, because she looks kind of familiar. I mean, one thing I know recently I saw her in was like a movie I was watching. It's kind of a Christmas movie I was watching on a Hallmark, like, maybe last week or something like that. I happened to see it, and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I just happened to see, like I said, you know, me and when I recognize actors and stuff like that. I don't know her name, but I feel like I have seen her and stuff before. I just can't place it. Maybe it's just that one movie, and it's kind of in my head that I've seen her in other stuff when I actually haven't. But the whole, you know, it was a whole situation where basically her wife Michelle was like, yeah, saying that her Agent Christopher never brings her, like, any colleagues from work around because, like, she knows what she does. I mean, but it's like because of what she does, she doesn't ask too many questions and stuff like that. So I guess it was kind of nice seeing a little bit of a personal side to her. Her wife, after all these years, after, like, I think she said they've been together for 17 years. So, but what made it very fascinating is why Agent Christopher brought her over. It's like, okay, so Rufus did tell Wyatt and Lucy about, like, yeah, about telling Agent Christopher, and Agent Christopher, like, with everything being the way it is, like, Agent Christopher realizes, like, she could lose her family because of, like, more in a simple way of, like, something could happen to them, like an accident or something like that, or something could happen to her. And it's just kind of like, you know, that's just kind of a life situation. I mean, that sucks, but it's something you can at least prepare or handle something like that, like losing someone in that sense. But now with everything that's going on, she looks at what happens with Lucy, in particular Lucy's mom. Lucy's mom had a daughter in a different timeline, but she doesn't remember having Amy. It's like Amy doesn't exist to her, and Lucy's the only one that's got that memory. And she's like, you know, as a mom herself, it breaks her heart because she's like, what if that same thing happens to her? She ends up forgetting her kids, or even Michelle, you know, they end up forgetting each other or something like that. And it's like, so she wants Lucy to keep this flash drive with them on the lifeboat anytime they go, because anything that's time traveling with them, I assume, isn't affected by any changes. Like, for instance, the reason why Lucy remembers everything is because she was in the lifeboat when time was changing and everything. So they're in a little protective time bubble from any changes really affecting them and their memories. That's why they're able to remember the things they do. So it's like, if she keeps the flash drive there in the lifeboat, it should keep it safe. It shouldn't be affected by time. Which is like, that was very, like, you see her all teary-eyed and almost like saying that. And it's weird because you never see that side of her. It's just like, you know, with the realization of what's going on, which she is talking about, the fact is that she is looking into Rittenhouse too. But more so than anything, it's like seeing that vulnerable side to her. It's like, you know, she's just kind of been the straightforward agent. And it's like, little by little, I feel like you've seen kind of like a little bit of her personality kind of peek through a little bit, kind of like that more. Like, she's never been like a bad, like, officer, like, agent or whatever. Like, because to me, I always kind of was kind of like, she's kind of that straightforward agent. So that's when the whole situation about Amy came up. I was like, I kind of felt like that was BS. It's like saying what Lucy wanted to hear just to keep her kind of working with the team and whatnot. That's how I chalked it up as. But as you can see, like, you know, she's a wife, she's a mother. And so she does, like, you get to see that very caring side of her rather than just kind of a stoic agent. You kind of see that side of her. That's why I just thought it's kind of interesting about this episode. I also had, like, Mason a little bit, kind of like, I mean, getting super drunk and coming to Rufus, kind of talking about his own experience. He's like, yo, like, about his own mom and everything, kind of talking about the fact that he kind of comes from a very similar background that Rufus does. That he just, for him, it's like everything he's done, he's always just like having a wrench in his hand. He like working on stuff. It's never been about the money and stuff like that. And bringing it up, they're like, hey, I'm not a bad guy, which I think I'm pretty sure I commented on that last episode. Like, Mason isn't actually a bad guy. He just got mixed up with some very bad people. I mean, to him, it was just like, oh, these people want to fund my project. Of like, oh, they want to help me make time travel a thing. They're like, they made it possible for me to keep doing the things I love, because it's like, yeah, it's fine and dandy to have a passion project, but when you don't have money behind it, it's impossible to keep doing what you love. So he probably looked at it as an opportunity, like, oh man, I get to do wonderful things. And it's like, oh, you had an ulterior motive for it. And the reason why Mason got super drunk is because of what he had to tell Rufus, and that's Rittenhouse knows that he's been tampering with the recorder, and like, this is the last chance. after this, I can't protect you or your family. And he's like, I'm really sorry. You just seem a little drunk and just sad. And it breaks his heart to have to do that because he legitimately cares for, Rufus. And it's like, he's, like I said, he's not a bad guy. He's just a guy just caught in a very messed up situation. And, it just kind of sucks. But in this episode, we had a team. I brought it up last episode. They went to the 1700s. I think specifically it's What was it? 1758? Maybe 1758. I don't remember. It's something like it's because it's not. I thought it was going to be right around the Revolutionary War. It's still a little while because at this point George Washington still hasn't even become president yet. It's still like 10 more years before he becomes president. And there's that whole situation about them calling it because Lucy calls him Your Excellency, and even Rufus comments on it. It's like, yeah, he's not president yet. So it's kind of interesting. It's like I never would have thought to call George Washington Your Excellency. Like it's not just her. A lot of people kind of refer to him as that, but nevertheless, you have to go back to stop Flynn because they're like, oh, obviously he's going to work with Benedict Arnold to change history and kill George Washington. But when they actually get there, they find out that Flynn actually has another plan. He wants to join forces, and everyone's like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, because for him, the message he ended up getting last episode, I knew it had something to do with the whole Revolutionary War. The reason why we're going there this episode, they ended up going there this episode. It turns out the person who wrote it was Benedict Arnold. And they kind of use this as an opportunity to kind of get close to him. It's like, tell Washington that they're spies so they can get rid of Arnold. Well, really not get rid of him because George wants to capture him specifically and then, kind of look him in the eyes and then hang him essentially. Because a very interesting thing, because I'm not a history buff, but it was kind of an interesting, like kind of an emotional connection between Benedict Arnold and George Washington because apparently they were like best friends. That was his right-hand man, the person he trusted more so than anyone else. And it's like finding out the person he trusted, the person that's like a brother to him, betrayed him, was a traitor, it's got to be the hardest thing. But you also get the flip side of it with Lucy and everything. Because I really love how the fact is that they BS their way through that whole situation where Lucy is like, oh yeah, don't you recognize Wyatt? He was with you in that so-and-so battle. And he's like, right, yeah, of course I remember. Because I guess just being the prideful person he is, he'd never want to admit, like, oh yeah, I actually forgot a soldier that fought with me. But the thing is, Benedict felt betrayed by Washington. It's like, he was like my brother and he betrayed me. Because it's like, he's fought countless battles, showed countless amounts of courage. The fact of the matter is, there was a moment in a fight where his horse got shot and he still kept on fighting. He took a musket bullet to the leg. And the reason why he kind of walks with a cane and everything. And it's like, and when it came time for a promotion, someone else got it instead of him. And Washington did nothing about it. And it's like, he felt like, it kind of comes up later on in the episode, but he's such a prideful man that he felt betrayed by Washington. And it's like it's that side of just finding out that like at the base of his like betrayal, it's not because he 100% believed what the opposition believed. It's not necessarily that. For him, it was a simple matter of pride. He felt betrayed by the person he trusted the most. That's what pushed him. Now, whether that's historically accurate, I don't know, but at least within the confines of the show, and I think it's such an interesting reason, like that usually that's what causes people to betray you, not just because they're evil by nature, but it's an emotional reason. He betrayed Washington, the person that was like a brother, his best friend, for an emotional reason, not because maybe some shape or form he believed in the other side's beliefs, but I really truly believe it was mainly because he just was betrayed. He felt betrayed. So, but they were able to kind of convince him because it's like more so than just being connected to Rittenhouse by that letter. It seems that he's also kind of close to being one of its co-founders. And then, they start asking all these questions, and Flynn is like, okay, so tell me about Rittenhouse. And he's like, fine, I'll introduce you to David Rittenhouse. And everyone's like, hey, Rittenhouse is one dude. It's like, yeah, this entire time they've been based on the knowledge. Like, okay, I thought it was supposed to be a group. And even Flynn was like, yeah, it's supposed to be. None of the, Lucy's journals ever said anything about it being just one person. And the fact of the matter is they end up actually meeting this guy, David Rittenhouse, and his son, John Rittenhouse. And it's so scary and interesting how his beliefs are, because he even has John raised to believe, like, he literally compared people, particular peasant people, to clock hands on a clock. They just go round and around and around. That basically peasants can only have to be kind of almost puppeteered. They have to be controlled. They have to be pointed in the right direction, kind of showing you what Rittenhouse eventually became. That's the reason why they believe what they do, is because David himself believes that basically people cannot be trusted on their own, that someone has to work from the shadows to kind of orchestrate everything to keep them going down the right path, but Lucy kind of brings up the conversation of like, is that really the right thing to do? Because it's like, what about people having their own voice, making their own choices? And then once again, it's like, but they can't be trusted to make their own choices. They like the thought of having like the belief that they have their own voice while someone else kind of speaks for them. And it's so interesting when you see that kind of like hardcore belief, and not just in David, but also in his son. But it's kind of that situation where it's like, very rarely will you have a kid kind of, it's not, especially at such a young age, when you have like such a almost, well, I guess the term that Lucy kind of used was totalitarianist. David being the way he is, it just, kind of pushing his beliefs onto his son for such a long time. Because even Lucy herself is like, well, what do you believe, John? And he's like, it's interesting. Like, you're the first person who's ever asked me that. Because for him, it's always been like, his dad is like, believe this, believe this, believe this. This is my way. You should follow in suit. It was very interesting when you ended up seeing David kind of immediately realizing everything was kind of hinky, because he looks at Lucy and he sees that she's sweating a little bit. He sees the way Flynn's position, like he's reaching for a gun or whatever. So he's like, I know you came here to kill me. Even being kind of a shitty person and be like, oh yeah, look at you, Lucy. You got such thin hips. You got beautiful teeth. You're just very pretty and knowledgeable. He's like, you essentially like, oh, you'd make a perfect baby factory. It's like, you disgusting piece of crap. It's just, I don't know. It's like, the fact is, because even Benedict himself said, like, if he caught eye of Lucy, he would push and be like, oh yeah, immediately want to take her immediately to his bed. And it's literally what he had one of his guards say, like, oh yeah, take her to my bed. And it's like, man, you're disgusting. You're a pig. But when it all came down to it, it was kind of like, hey, kill, David Rittenhouse, because for everyone, I love a lot about this episode because it leads a lot of people conflicted. I mean, not really a lot of people, specifically Lucy. Lucy's conflicted with the thought of killing someone. It's like, one thing bad enough, it's like, because at the beginning it's like, okay, Rittenhouse, yeah, it's like she didn't want to work with Flynn because it meant like, it's like, oh, you're going to kill a lot of people to take down Rittenhouse, because at that point they thought it was one group. But it's like, even finding out it's one person, it's like, that still doesn't justify it, because it's like, who's to say what will be the ramifications for this? You have Wyatt and Rufus being okay with it for their own reasons. Rufus is okay with this because for him, it's like, the fact of the matter is, if they take out Rittenhouse now, that undoes everything. It makes sure that him and his family are safe, and he never has to worry about, being kind of their puppet. And then for Wyatt, Flynn had promised him, it's like, I will give you the name of the man who murdered your wife. And for Wyatt, that means everything, because it's, even with his connections and stuff like that, I'm sure he was, because that is something I've never even thought about. The fact is that he has it all kind of laid out in front of him in his place. And it's like, why? Of course, Wyatt would be looking for the guy who killed his wife, but even with his connections, he wouldn't be able to. But Flynn has higher clearance than him, has access to a lot more assets and information, people to kind of work for him, even in the situation he's in now. So I'm sure Lucy's journal probably helped him kind of come to the conclusion of like, I should have that as a key to help me get Wyatt on my side. So it's like, for them, they're both heavily motivated, and Lucy's just kind of like, she doesn't know, because like, once again, you don't know how this whole thing works. Who's to say that if they kill Rittenhouse, just things won't the dominoes won't stop flowing, and it's just be like, there'll be drastic changes, because she's kind of a historian and her job is kind of keeping history intact. But then Wyatt kind of brings up the thing, it's like, well, who's to say once this is all said and done, you won't get back to your sister? Because it's like, taking out Rittenhouse undoes everything. It makes it so, theoretically speaking, it should make it so that they never went back in time. I mean, really, when it comes to time travel, you have to split hairs because it's like, well, technically, it would kind of undo everything because it'd be like they never had a reason to go back in time in the first place because Rittenhouse was taken care of, and Flynn would never lost his family as a means of having to take them out in the first. They had to go back in time to try and stop them in the first place. But at the same time, the whole cycle thing of like, yeah, they take out Rittenhouse, but then that also means that they have to be there in the past to travel back in time to make sure that Rittenhouse, like it, it depends on what rules of time travel there are, because it's like there's a cycle to everything. That even if you end the cycle, the fact of the matter is there's still the beginning and the rotation of the cycle that still have to follow through for all eternity is how you keep things rolling. Or is it one of those situations like once you kind of cut up, in the metaphor that they use, kind of cutting off the head of essentially the Hydra, it's cutting off the head of it, you kind of topple it forever so that there's no more need to kind of keep slicing at it, like, through the other movements of time. I know I'm kind of like not making any sense. I'm trying to best explain it best way I can. Essentially, I'm not sure. Is it kind of like everything's completely undone, or is there still the cycle that has to play out for things to reach the point they are? Like, that's just the best way I can put it. But Flynn does manage to kill David, but his son John runs away, which in that moment, everyone's like, wait, you're not about to kill a kid, right? He's like, I have to. I mean, David already warned that there are others, even if he kills David. I mean, as we know, David does have other kind of almost apprentices, so the message will be passed on to them. Even if he's gone, his message will live past him, because being all martyr-ish. And so it's like, Flynn wants to kill John because it's like, because Lucy and Wyatt and them are kind of like, oh, we're not going to kill a kid. But it's one of those situations. Best example I can give is always the question, like, if you had an opportunity, would you kill Hitler as a kid? Just because it's like, yeah, it's like, this is Hitler at his innocent stage, sure, but you know what he grows up to do. So it's like Rittenhouse has had their hands in a lot of stuff that's happened over the years, especially because Lucy got a little bit from her journal being like, oh yeah, a lot of stuff that played out in history, they had a hand in. Stuff that's become history to her. It's kind of like, yeah, things played out this certain way in history, but it's like they only played out that certain way because of Rittenhouse's influence. So it's kind of like, that's the way history's supposed to be. So is it really right to kind of destroy Rittenhouse in that sense of like, it means kind of undoing a lot of history, like, because it's hard to say in what situation, like, what's the right path and what's the wrong path. Because it's like, did Rittenhouse do what was best for the world, or did they do it for what was best for them? And even if they were doing what was best for the world, was it their right to interfere with the way things are supposed to be? Things should have been left to go the way they are. I mean, because the question is also how much of their history, because Rittenhouse has been in the background since that far back, since the beginning of the country. So it begs the question, like, how much of the American history was influenced? I mean, because American history doesn't just influence America, it affects everything in the world too. So them making moves in America also meant making moves all across the globe too, because it's like what goes down in one country easily affects another. Like, it's just, they're all kind of tied together in that sense, just because it's like, whether it's, trade and stuff like that, especially like government positions, like in other countries, will definitely affect that. So it's like, who's to say they didn't influence certain positions? Because we know that Nixon had a connection to Rittenhouse because he brought them up in the Watergate tape. So, but once again, it's like it's hard to say. Like, so it's like, that this is a great evil that will shape everything. So it's kind of like, would you kill, Hitler if you had the opportunity? And some people would say yes, but there are people who have legitimate reasons as you wouldn't do, because it's like, no matter what, he's still a kid. And in John's case, it's like, who's to say he will actually follow in his father's suit? Who's to say he won't grow up and who's to say? Because the way he was talking, it made it seem like he truly does believe what his father said. And now that this has all happened, who's to say he won't follow that path even more so? Because it's like, oh, these people killed my father. It's like, no, I'm going to take this charge. I'm going to take charge, like, because his father died a martyr. For him, it's like, no, I'm going to follow my father's beliefs. I'm going to make sure that nothing like this happens again. Because people have to be put in check. People have to be monitored and be the strings pulled, essentially. So who's to say John doesn't grow up to basically make Rittenhouse the way it is now? I mean, who's to bear the question that things didn't play out this way? In fact, that basically they went back in time and killed David, which pushed John to do what he's doing now, or, the chicken or the egg type of situation. What came first, I mean, even more, because Lucy came to Garcian because Garcian let something slip in his, not let slip, he openly brings something up in this episode. She's like, okay, what are you going to do when it's all said and done? And he tells Lucy that when it's all said and done, he'll be back with his family, because hopefully, not even hopefully, he truly believes that everything will be fine. And maybe it will. It's really hard to say. Once Rittenhouse is taken care of, will that kind of revert the timeline back to the way it's supposed to be, like his family being alive. He will hug his little girl and his wife, and then afterwards he will say goodbye to them forever. And Lucas is like, why? You've done so much to get to them. And for Garcian, it's all about the fact is because he's done so much to get to where he's at. He's hurt a lot of people. He's killed a lot of people. It's like, how can I be around them after everything I've done? It's like, even if the timeline ends up reverting, even if that ends up being the case and everything I've ever done is erased, it doesn't change the fact is that what I did still exists because it lives with me. Because in their situations, even when it's all said and done inside of, because once again, that whole situation of like, would they be protected from the timeline being reverted to its original state? So, would they remember everything when it's all said and done? I mean, you would argue, yeah, they would, because it's like, but it's like, what kind of world would they go back to? Like, because technically the time machines wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Rittenhouse. So it's like, I guess they pop back into the original times with no memories of this or anything. I mean, maybe that's what this is kind of all leading to. I don't know. It really depends on how well this show does, whether they like end the season off on a cliffhanger, but that could be where it's all leading to, that when it's all said and done, they just go back to their daily lives, not ever remembering each other, knowing that they knew each other in a different timeline. It's something to kind of think about. But sadly, John did get away, and Flynn grabs Lucy and is like, okay, I'm going to show you kind of what you've done, and takes off with her in a lifeboat, leaving both Rufus and Wyatt behind. Now, this brings up many different questions. Now, to me personally, like, the first thought that crossed my mind is maybe that's not going to be the case, because they haven't really talked about it before. I've kind of brought this up in other TV shows when it comes to time traveling. But the fact is, of going to the future, to me, I was wondering if that's what Garcian was going to do, go to the future to kind of show Lucy just what kind of world is created because Rittenhouse stayed in power and the things played out a certain way. But now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, most likely what he's going to do is take her back to other points in history where Rittenhouse influenced things, kind of showing like, oh yeah, this is what Rittenhouse did. They caused all this devastation and stuff like that. Or maybe take her back to their base. Because it does seem like they're back at their base from a little bit of a scene of the previews of the next couple episodes. It does seem like they're back at their... So maybe he's kind of showing her the outline there. Rather than showing her in person, he's just showing her like the maps of history of being like, this, and this was all caused by Rittenhouse. So... many different questions. Because also what's going to happen with Rufus, because that whole conversation was recorded. I mean, because that was the whole thing that Mason warned him, was like, you do not tamper with this, because this is your last chance. If they find out you tampered with it, you're screwed. But there was that whole conversation Garcian had. It was like, to them, this was supposed to be like a one-shot deal, wipe out Rittenhouse once and for all, and it wouldn't be a problem about being recorded. Also, the fact is Garcian knows about them being recorded. I'm guessing either from Lucy's journal, or maybe he found out from Anthony learning, because that'd be kind of the protocol. No, it has to be from Lucy's. No, I'm stupid. Because he wouldn't know about Rittenhouse's protocols. He'd know about Mason's, sure, but not Rittenhouse. But nevertheless, a very good episode with a lot of stuff going down, kind of gets your brain really thinking about where this might all be heading. Sadly, the show is taking a break and it won't be coming back until January 16th, so... super excited to see what they kind of decide to do with everything. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.